Namaste, Suswagatam, and welcome to our 232 episode of Gyan Ganga Words of Wisdom on our Virat Hindustan Sangam social media channels. As you all know, we are on various social media channels at the same time: Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Spaces, and various podcasts. So it is again another Sunday, 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and we are back with your program. Today, we have a very interesting discussion on decolonizing the Indian mind to transform India. And along with Dr. Subramanian Swamy, we have another guest from Ladakh. Her name is Gitanjali J. ANGMO. She is the co-founder, director, and dean of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh, known as HIAL, India. HIAL is an alternative university for mountain development based on the principles of contextual and experimental learning that is transforming higher education in India. She is a achieving scholar at the Oxford University and a woman transforming Indian national awardee from the government of India. It's a great pleasure to have Madam Gitanjali on our program. And with these words, it is over to Dr. Subramanian Swamy to start today's discussion on the topic. Over to Dr. Swamy.
Thank you very much, Jagdish. It's a great pleasure to invite and listen to what you're looking forward to, Gitanjali, ANGMO. And we have already had the pleasure of hearing her husband, who has been the most articulate I've seen on the subject that he dealt with us, with a great deal of humor and so many other things. So we look forward to a greater interaction between different parts of India, and certainly for years Ladakh has been kept as a kind of a protected area by the government because of some reasons of defense, etc. But we don't accept that. We think that there should be free flow of Indians. Instead of going to the usual places for visiting, they should also go to Ladakh. And Ladakh has a huge history. And if you study it, you will be surprised why we know so little. There's a Buddhist center called, I think, I forget its name. It's Jesus Christ is supposed to have come, according to many books I've read, to study Buddhism. And in fact, many of the thoughts and speeches of Jesus Christ has been, of course, the Christians don't protest, but there are so many books you can get from just by going to Google and getting it out, which say that he came in those 14 days when he's missing in the Bible. He is supposed to have come, and his dress, for example, is connected with the North community, and the way they dress, he had also dressed later on in his life. So I mean, the spiritual center that it is there, Hemis Gumpa is the name of the Buddhist center, which has been subject of, there's been the aspiration of many people to come. And it's very sad that all of us have been denied the easy opportunity to go to Ladakh. And I think that's now slowly will force it to be melted, and so that we can go. All of us in the VHS are looking forward to going. I was to go a little 2 weeks earlier, but I came to know that the program for which I was to go was not going to be permitted by the government. So I didn't want to be a further embarrassment for my hosts in Ladakh. But now we have the pleasure of hearing a scholar. She is also, I think, perhaps the director of the Himalayan Institute of HIAL, it's abbreviated. And this is the reason why we think that we can't get a better person to tell us about the geopolitics of Ladakh and its context in how the rest of India should be responding. So over to her and a warm welcome. Please take it that we will be standing by you. There will be no ifs and buts in our standing with you. And we are an all India organization, and we tend we know exactly how to deal with the governments which misbehave with the citizens. Civil rights is very, very dear to us. Many of us fought the emergency. I was, in fact, for 20 months, I was giving Mr. Gandhi a hard time by going underground and moving around the world, speaking against all that things were happening. So we are committed to democracy, which is something very dear to most of the people in Ladakh, as in the rest of India. And we also know it's a beautiful place. We're looking forward to spending some time this summer. And so, without taking more time, over to great scholar Gitanjali ANGMO. And we want to hear from you your thesis that you have been working on and the institute that you are setting up. Over to you, Gitanjali ji.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to your show, which is very beautifully named Gyan Ki Ganga, Words of Wisdom. And I will start with my journey. I have been a part of a family, half of which live in US and Canada. And that's how it has been for the last 50 years, that the bright ones migrate to the US or Canada. And similar would have been my fate, because the history books that we read, and when I was in my 10th grade, it does not make you feel proud of being an Indian. And you are always on the receiving end, and it is always the grass is greener, across the seas in Europe or the US or Canada. But at the age of 16, I had the greatest fortune of going to a youth camp, which was in Sri Aurobindo Society, Pondicherry. And there I was introduced to Sri Aurobindo's book, Foundations of Indian Culture. And I remember when I started hearing of the great civilization that India was, which Sri Aurobindo has written about, I started weeping, and I didn't want people to see me do that. So I shifted to the center of the room and finally to the end of the room. And it was so uncontrollable, the weeping, that I had to at one point leave the hall. And, I went to the washroom and I was crying like I had discovered something so precious, which I never had. And it is then that I vowed that I will dedicate my entire life to knowing about India in the first place, and then telling Indians about India, and then telling the world about India. And not just in words, but through rediscovering the ancient knowledge that we have and reviving it and creating new frameworks in every field, be it social, cultural, economical, technological, and so on. And that's how I stayed back, even after several lucrative offers that came my way. I have always been in India and have worked here. But still, I was in the corporate sector, and then I set up my companies. I was a serial entrepreneur. I set up 3 companies, and which is when the need to do real work in rural India, became so strong in me that I decided to go back to Ladakh and use my professional knowledge and skills that I had gained to set up an institute of higher learning, which is Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh, as a co-founder along with Sonam Wangchuk, because education is that lever which can actually change the most important faculty as well as the weapon, for the coming times, which is the mind. As we know, the World War III will not be fought with atom bombs or even nuclear bombs, but it will be through the lever, which is the highest in human consciousness, the mind, through narratives, through the way how we can control others. And that's how Macaulay and the British control India, through our minds, by telling us that we are not good enough. And that is the way we have to undo it, at that very level. And that is why I shifted to Ladakh. And to my surprise, when I went there, thinking that these are tribal people and, we will be setting up a university. So because there was no university at that point in Ladakh about 10 years ago. And the students had to go out of Ladakh to study. There was just a degree college there. So we thought of setting up this university, and I thought I would bring my entire professional knowledge to teach them. But to my surprise, very soon I realized that more than teaching them, I had to learn from them. Unlike the youth of mainland India, who look at education as a means to jettison their native places. If one belongs to a village, then education means you move to the nearest city. If you're in a small city in India, you move to if you are in a big capital of a state, you want to move to Delhi. And if you're in Delhi, you want to move to Dubai or New York. That is what education had become. And here I saw that the Ladakhi youth, they always wanted to come back to Ladakh after they had finished their education and go back to the village and work there. And that was to me something very touching. And even today we tell in our university in the making that for us, success is not when educated youth would leave Ladakh and dump the problems, just for personal selfish reasons of going out, for better prospects. But if they go back to their village and start transforming it. So that was to me a big learning. And also the fact that how indigenous knowledge systems were still practiced there. How water was conserved, how the panchayati system through the Goba and Sarpanch worked, how the grassroots democracy, which Sri Aurobindo has spoken about, he says that parliamentary form of system is not India's Swadharma, and it will be 100 years before India realizes the mistake. He said that 100 years ago, and rightly so, after 100 years, we had 3 hung parliaments. And the last 2 times, Mr. Modi has won because he ran the campaign like a presidential candidate. And so Sri Aurobindo had said that it is the presidential form of system with a very strong panchayat system that and loosely held federal states. That is the future of Indian democracy. And I saw that at play in Ladakh. I saw the way development was not destroying environment. I saw the way people used compost toilets because flushing 6 liters of fresh water after every use is not a sustainable way of providing these services to the whole 7 billion population in the world. And that's when I began to study deeper, and I found that the way rural India and especially tribal India lived was very much in line with Sri Aurobindo's ideas of development. He has categorically said that let us not follow the industrial ways of the West, only to realize 50 years later, the same problems that they are facing today. And he believed in a development of India, one village at a time, a vibrant rural India with all its diversity and all its beauty, and not a monoculture which is dished out by the global, corporations today. And that is our philosophy at the Himalayan Institute, that it is a university for the mountain context. And contextual education is what we teach there. For instance, it has temperatures there go up to minus 20 degrees. And these cement buildings which we build, they're not even serving us in Delhi and Gurgaon, because we are copying the West. We are copying the temperate architectural styles of Europe by making glass facade buildings, be it in Gurgaon or Hyderabad or Bangalore, and they're ugly glass facade buildings, which take the temperature from 40 degrees to 60 degrees first, and then we retrofit them with ACs to bring it down to 18 degrees. So we are really guzzling fossil fuel. And because we are a colonized mind that just copies the architectural solutions of Europe, which has very different climatic circumstances. And India has 70% people living in rural India, of which 60% live in mud houses. But even after 75 years, we don't have an Earth Architecture Institute in this country. Because we have the cement lobbies, which are, in the name of development, they are not allowing, because Earth is something everybody can afford, and it does not help the lobbies there. So we at Hayal set up India's first Earth architecture, and it is not just building with Earth; it is also solar. It is passive solar heated buildings, which means it does not need any active energy. It stays at plus 20 when it is minus 20 outside. And this we studied from 1500-year-old palaces, from our indigenous knowledge systems, which had architecture done by following the rules of Vastu Shastra, by looking at the elements and the flow of heat and air, and not just depending on fossil fuel to heat or cool the buildings. And this is what I mean when I say we have to decolonize our minds and start from first principles, which are based in the Indian ethos, in the Indian genius. And we are doing well, reviving the Indian knowledge systems, but I think it is more a lip service than actually things happening on the ground. The new education policy talks about Indian knowledge systems, but they are happening independently. And here there is business as usual going on in the architecture colleges and schools. People are being taught non-contextual architecture, which does not actually, help the cause of carbon neutral buildings. Even I appreciate our Prime Minister's vision of carbon neutral India and carbon neutral Ladakh, but I think his understanding of carbon neutrality has to be deepened a bit. He thinks that carbon neutrality means that you keep generating carbon side and install solar photovoltaics on the other side so that you set it off. But true carbon neutrality would be you don't even generate carbon, So have a lifestyle, have indigenous knowledge systems in architecture and materiality that don't even generate carbon. And that's the thing we are trying to do. And that's one of the examples. But there are several areas in which we need to decolonize. Something in governance, for instance, is our Indian administrative service. It is such a colonial remnant of Indian civil services. It was a service which was set up by the elite Scots and English who would come to India to exploit the Indians. And therefore, it did not matter if they have an expertise in something or not. And we are continuing with the same by just changing the name. And there are fundamental problems in the IAS. For instance, each officer is, like, for instance, to Ladakh, the commissioners and others who come, the DCs, they are there just for 2 years. I've been to Ladakh as an outsider and took me 5 years to understand the ecosystem, the fragility, the problems there, to start doing developmental and policy changes there. 2 years is just not enough to make a difference somewhere. So that's the first problem, this IAS, First of all, they are not specialists. Secondly, they're just there for 2 years. Thirdly, somebody from Andhra is in the Mizoram cadre. And how does that person understand Mizoram, for heaven's sake? Even though, this cadre should not be chosen. First of all, IAS should be scrapped. And we should have lateral entries of experts, like in the US, you have Nobel laureates, advising the senators. Even though we want to phase it out slowly, we should find out the cadre before they want to join and have an exam on that particular system as well. And there is no difference between the Firangis of yore, who went with their large entourages in their large vehicles, draining the exchequer and, expecting servility from people around them, to the IAS officers of today, though brown-skinned, but very much like their older counterparts. So this IAS is one system which has to be absolutely taken a relook at. So even a small thing like the budget speech, it took us 55 years, and Vajpayee ji to bring it up to 11 a.m. It was being
Right.
at 5 p.m. because it was 12:30 at the House of Commons, in Britain, and it took us 55 years to realize that we are just still colonized. Today, I was at a convocation at a university, and I was wondering, what are these gowns doing there? Like those medieval gowns which were adopted by Oxford and Cambridge. At Hayal, for instance, we wear the local goncha, the local dress. Why can't we celebrate who we are? And similarly, English speaking is another thing. We proudly say that 123 million Indians speak English, but that's just 10% of the entire population. And until recently, the High Court, Supreme Court, higher education was all in English. So we are deliberately creating a glass ceiling for 90% of bright Indians who, just because of language, appear to be not bright and intelligent. Like, for all my intelligence, if I were to ask to deliver this talk in French or Mandarin today, I would come across, looking an absolute idiot. So English language is something we are absolutely colonized by. Education today means knowing English, and mother tongue is completely jettisoned in favor of this English language. We have to be proud of our mother tongue and who we are. And if we look at the top 20 GDP countries in the world, Switzerland or Germany, they have the mass language and the official language is the same. And that need not be English. But if we see the bottom 20, they are all colonized nations who have adopted the language of the colonizers. Not that we have something against English, but that could be a third or fourth language that allows you to relate to the world. But that's something we need to look at. The whole socio-cultural, economic, technological frameworks, which today are a cut, copy, paste of the West, need to be, I jokingly say, and maybe it's not a joke after all, that the first ministry that should have been set up in 1947 when we began the era of self-governance is Ministry of Decolonization. And that should have taken a look at every aspect of our social, cultural, and technological life, both individual and collective, and should have come up with frameworks that showcase our genius, that showcase our ethos and our approach. Because every country has a swadharma. It has a certain way of being. And Sri Aurobindo says in his book, The Human Cycle, that after the age of individuality or reason, which was the last 400 years after the Dark Ages, the period of Renaissance, we are now moving to the age of subjectivity and spirituality. And he says in his Uttar Para speech that when it is said that India will rise, it is Sanatan Dharma that will rise. Not because for India herself to be great, but because that's the way forward for the whole of humanity. And we can see that in issues like climate change. And that's why we are asking for the 6th schedule in Ladakh, because the issue of climate change does not need trillions of dollars as is identified in every COP meeting. It just needs the Indian approach of giving up a desire rather than fulfilling it. We need not be in the horde of GDP growths. because we know that that may not be the way our Swadharma is built. I have been to the remote villages in Ladakh where when there is a marriage in the family is sitting absolutely, free, doing nothing, because the entire village has come, not just to work, but somebody has taken up the cost of the food, somebody of gifts, and so on. So we have this huge social capital, which is completely missed when we do GDP calculations. And this social capital is a fallout of our spiritual way of being. The whole idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not just a slogan. This is actually how we lived. The whole, so we need to come up with even our own matrices of success, our own matrices of growth. We need not follow the West's GDP model, because it's so ironical that if I use a car and I consume petrol, I buy the car, and then I go and eat pizza every day and I grow obese, and then I go to a hospital and get myself cured. So all of this is adding to the GDP. But if I have a bicycle, I don't add to the GDP. I bicycle to my work every day. I eat healthy food at home, so I'm not adding to the GDP of the restaurant food, and I'm healthy. I don't use curative but preventive ways of Ayurveda. So my GDP will be lower, but it does not mean in any which way that my lifestyle is in any way less. So GDP and this whole urbanization as a model of development, like I appreciate the amount of work that has happened in making bridges and transport and all of that. We need it, but along with it, we also need rural development, which has been completely missing in the last 65 years and even in the last 10 years. I have seen the state. I have personally visited the primary schools in the government schools in the villages, and they don't have infrastructure. They don't have teachers, and that has been no change in the past 10 years. And these are the matrices of our success that we have to replace. So so this is the decolonization that we have to take a look at, and we don't have to depend for its validation or ratification when these things come back from the West, as did yoga or other things. There are, if you look at liberal arts education in this country, and liberal arts is the backbone of a democracy. If you see the higher, even students who have completed their postgraduation or PhDs, they do not have a view on, let's say, so our liberal arts education is also needs complete decolonization, because it's okay to read Freud and Jung and Skinner and Pavlov, for instance, in psychology. But what about Patanjali's yoga psychology, which is more integrated and whole? Similarly, history has to be rewritten, because till I was only now in some books it has changed, but till I was in my 10th grade, the 1857 war was still called a mutiny. It could be a mutiny from British point of view, but for us it was the sacred first war of independence. And so we allow ourselves to be looked by the Western lens even today, and we don't have a lens to look at them. So we need to, in liberal arts, have our own lens to look at ourselves and also look at the world through our lens. And that framework has to be developed and taught to our students. Similarly, if you go and look at the universities in like Harvard or all these places, you'll find very few Indian students study Indian philosophy, and very few Indian teachers who teach Indian philosophy. So Westerners teach and learn Indian philosophy, and the way they deal with this knowledge, which is so deep and symbolic, is quite facile. For instance, a lot of Western scholars look at the Vedas as a pastoral allegory, where there are farm animals like cows and horses, without thinking that these cow and horse symbolize divine light and divine power. And the Rig Veda was coded in a way that people who are not evolved do not misuse it. And the worst part is Indians start taking those interpretations, and these interpretations are designed to not make you feel high self-esteem and self-respect for your own culture. The way movies showcase India, including Bollywood. The English speaking elite are the upper class, and the Hindi speakers are, uneducated. Or even movies like Slumdog Millionaire, the way they showcase, our cultural stereotyping that we do. And our youth don't even realize that this is not something they have to be proud of, even though Slumdog Millionaire wins Oscars. So that kind of a lens or a searchlight is missing, because what is truly Indian, what makes us Indian, is missing from our education system. And what makes us Indian is actually spirituality. And unless we give up this shame of bringing spirituality into our curriculum and make it a part of who we are, I think we will always be trailing behind the West, because we are merely copying their solutions, and we will always be trailing 50 years behind. And what the world needs is the Indian perspective, the Indian approach to problem solving. And that's why the need for decolonizing the Indian mind.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's a very clear perspective that you've given to us. I have two questions to ask you before I hand it over to my colleagues. First is, have you read Integral Humanism of Deendayal Upadhyay? If you have not, I will try to. I'll arrange a copy of the book. He poor man was assassinated, so he couldn't really write a full treatise. But I have added materials to him, and I have published them also separately. But his original book, Integral Humanism, is based on the difference between the development of a society by Hindus, or if you want to say India, and the Westerners. And he talked about exactly what you just mentioned, namely that there has to be a blend between spiritual advancement and material progress. And he said, if you do, the Western world is all material progress only. Spiritual progress has not taken place, and sooner or later they will start picking from India, and that process has started. In fact, even as long as 2009, there was an editorial written by the editor of the Newsweek magazine, where she said that now we are all becoming Hindus. And the editorial in the Newsweek magazine, you heard of the Newsweek magazine, it's not so popular nowadays. It's a pure Anglo-Saxon publication. And but yet she wrote an editorial. She got a lot of flack on it, but she said very soon it'll be like that. So the second thing is, which I'd like to add, is that there's a school in England called St. James School, which is a very prestigious all-white students school. And there the principal decided that all the students should learn Sanskrit. And in the morning, they recite Sanskrit shlokas before classes start. And when Charles, the man who became King of England just now, Charles, he in his coronation, he insisted that a delegation should come from the students of this St. James School, and sing the shlokas for him, and he did it. Unfortunately, our media didn't carry it, but I'm sure that if you look at the BBC, you'll get a copy of it. So this is the artificial intelligence now. The American what is the space organization has in fact an article is available. You can get it in Google just by googling it, by saying NASA and Sanskrit, and you will get it all downloaded, where he says that it's inevitable because that Sanskrit will become the international language, because we cannot get another language so perfect that the computer will not get confused. And he gave an illustration that if, for instance, you educate a computer on English, then it'll get perennially confused by PUT, which is put, and BUT, which is but. So, yeah, but he says in Sanskrit, every word has a specific sound, and therefore this is the one which is going to be the development for the thing. So I think in the lines you have spoken, I thought I would add to what you just said, and we wish your HIAL, whatever it should grow. It should become a place where people, like they used to come in the old days to Ms. Gumpa, will come to your HIAL, and whatever we can do sitting in Delhi for you, we'll be very happy to associate. Over to Jagdish. Jagdish, if you please carry this further discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very enlightening knowledge which you shared with our viewers, and we at VHS have been propagating all this type of things which you have already said, and our program of Gyan Ganga and Words of Wisdom is basically focusing on that. Before I ask my question, my colleague Dr. Arvind Chaturvedi will definitely like to ask some question, and we'll take this discussion forward. Over to Arvind Chaturvedi.
Yeah, thank you, Jagdish, for giving me the opportunity. You have mentioned all those things which we actually, as Jagdish said, we have on our agenda on our organization, which is headed by Dr. Subramanian Swamy, Virat Hindustan Sangam. Even the Indian identity and the language. You mentioned about English. In fact, if you observe that every program in India starts with good morning, good afternoon, people don't even use namaskar. मैं थोड़ा हिंदी में लिखता हूं, तो मैंने बहुत पहले 20 साल पहले लिखा था कि जब से ये हाय बाय हेलो शब्द चले हैं, गुम हो गया है जैसे नमस्कार शहर में. तो नमस्कार is also forgotten by people. Not only that, everything which is British, everything which is Western is actually considered superior. That means a large number of Indians still suffer from the inferiority complex. 3 generations have changed after British left, but even then that effect continues. For example, take education. In the education field, a lot of Indian universities are doing very good work. They have almost every subject which is taught anywhere in the world, which is being taught in Indian universities. But a large number of Indians prefer to go abroad for a degree, because they think a degree from an American university or degree from a British university or even from Australian and New Zealand these days. A large number of Indians go to Australia also for education because they think that the foreign degree is much more valuable than the Indian degree. So this is the colonial mindset that somehow, I mean, I've been told you have done a lot of work in education. So what do you think can be done to get away from this mindset about education, Indian education not being so valuable as foreign education or foreign degree?
So I have devised an infographic called the Integral Education for the Future, and I'm happy to share. And I was the Chevening Scholar at Oxford last year, and it will be on permanent display at the V&A Museum in London as a permanent exhibit of the philosophy of the education of the future. And it has 5 principles. I touched upon the first one, which was contextual education, where the diversity of our country has to be respected, has to be understood, and has to be nurtured and cared for. So that is contextual education. Then we need to make education experiential. Okay, one of the things in which American universities score over India is that the teaching there is very experiential. Like an MIT would have thousands of patents, which an IIT would trail behind, with a few hundreds. That's because we don't learn by doing and being. And India was always pursuing reality, both through science and spirituality. And that is why we have to again decolonize the word secular from our constitution. I don't know why we put it there, because secular has a very different background. It is to keep the state and religion apart. Whereas in India, we speak of Raja Rishi, we speak of the philosopher king, we speak of every aspect of our life to be governed by dharma. So how can we keep state and religion apart? Because it is not religion in India. The other problem of colonized mind is to have our definitions as per them. Like dharma is translated as religion, which is a big mistake, because dharma comes from the root dhri, which means to hold on, to anchor. So dharma is something that anchors you in this life, that shows you, that's your pole star, that shows you the way. So we have to do away with this secular from our constitution, because in India, education was always experiential. It was never experimental alone. The West, after the Dark Ages, when there was a Renaissance, that's when we started understanding reality through our senses, through empirical evidence, by collecting data. But our rishis, it was always subjectively going within and experientially learning things. Do you know that thousands of years before Western scientists came up with the speed of light, the Indian rishi had, through his meditation, found out, and there is a shloka which says that light travels 2,202 um, uh, yojanas in half a nimisha. And if you calculate it, it comes to exactly the speed of light today. So how did they find that out? They found it out because of inner experiential learning. And that is what we have to promote. If we have to go and lead the world and become a Vishwa Guru, we have to go beyond the manas and the buddhi. We have chitta, which is our foundation of memory. Then we have manas, our sense mind, and then our buddhi. And that's where the Western model ends. But beyond buddhi, in India, we always have intuition. We have higher states of the mind. So we should not trail behind the US in AI. We fear that AI will take away our jobs. And but I say that if machines can do what humans can do, then why should humans dehumanize themselves? Let AI do all the jobs. And instead, India can lead the world by showing them what human beings are capable of. And that is what we call higher order thinking and deeper order feeling. We can, access higher ranges of the mind and deeper ranges of our soul or Atman, where essentially everything is one. So the entire problem of Earth, climate change is solved when you feel one with nature. And that's what India has to contribute to the world, experiential learning. And that's our second pillar. And the third is that, again, after the Industrial Revolution, knowledge was divided into specialities, and super specialities. But reality is composite. The specialization mindset always creates a side effect, because you're looking at a thing from only one point of view. But in India, we always stood for holistic understanding and doing. So the third thing we follow at our university is transdisciplinary education. So we take up problems and solve them through various disciplines, where the ego of the discipline is not important, but solving the problem. For instance, in Ladakh today, a lot of villages are being abandoned because the glaciers are melting and the waters in the canals have stopped coming. So people leave the villages and go. So one such village is Kulum, which we have over the last 3 years rehabilitated by 4 or 5 disciplines working together. The School of Ecology made artificial glaciers and brought water to the village. The School of Plantation greened the valley and came up with agricultural produce. And after 15 years, 2 years ago, we grew 1,500 kilos of potatoes after 15 years, and half the village came back. And last year, 5,000 more kilos were produced of broccoli and a lot of other things. And then the School of Eco-Responsive Architecture retrofitted the buildings and made them passive solar so that people can stay and not migrate to Jammu or Goa in the winters. And the School of Responsible Tourism is curating an edu-tourism experience so that in addition to subsistence agriculture, the people can also earn their livelihoods through tourism. So this kind of an interdisciplinary approach was essentially Indian. And that is why Sri Aurobindo's yoga is also called integral yoga, where all aspects, are brought in for growth and problem solving. And this is what we have to contribute to the world. And then the final pillar of our education, as I said, is education was considered to be 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. But 100 years ago, Mahatma Gandhi said that we have to move to 3 H's, which is head, heart, and hands. Because reading, writing, and arithmetic had everything to do with the head alone. And I propose that for the 21st century, we have to move away from 3 H's to 3 A's. And I take the vocabulary from the Kena Upanishad, which says that we have to have Adhibhuta knowledge. Adhibhuta is the knowledge of the material world around us. And then Adhidaivik knowledge, which is non-material world, relational world, emotional thought, mental world. But that's not enough. There's a third A that we have to actually figure out how to integrate right from kindergarten, and that is Adhyatma. And it is not something woolly or impractical. It is as simple as finding out what you're born for, your Swadharma. What is your purpose of life? What the Japanese called Ikigai. And because they follow that, they are one of those blue zones where people live to more than 100 years. Because people do not take up a job as just what will pay or livelihoods, but what is their purpose of life. So I personally take these sessions for my kids. What is to find out what is their Swadharma, and we align their work as per their Swadharma. And these are the things which our education system should quickly incorporate. And that is why I say the first thing that has to be decolonized is our education. Though the NEP has made a good start by including mother tongue and other things, but any policy is as good as its implementation. And we have to work in creating those prototypes and models which can be torch bearers for India and the world.
I'll just mention one point, taking the clue from your last point that you made about the Indian languages in NEP. Now, let me tell you, when it was introduced, many people appreciated, that Hindi, Telugu, Bangla, Tamil, and all that they'll get developed. Like Japanese learn, they learn in Japanese language. Chinese learn in Chinese language. Why can't Indians learn in Indian languages? But let me tell you, so many engineering colleges which have been opened and medical colleges which have been offering the language education, there are no takers. The colleges had to withdraw the program in Hindi language in Madhya Pradesh, in Bhopal, in Indore, because there were no Hindi takers. So, on one hand, we have policy issues. And when I mention this, let me also mention, you mentioned about yoga. Yoga becomes yoga, and we adopt yoga, not yoga. But we read books on yoga written by foreign authors, not by Indian authors. I was reading some books on Vedic mathematics, Vedic astrology, not by Indians, but written by foreigners. So we adopt those books with much fanfare because they think they are the treasure of knowledge. but not the books written by Indians. So that is also the mindset that I was mentioning.
Yeah. So for that to rectify, what I feel is that what foundations of Indian culture did to me, it changed the way I look at India. Even students who study mathematics in their post-graduation do not know that more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras, in 800 BC, it was Bodhayana who had in the Sulba Sutra, written about that theorem. But they think it is Pythagoras. Now the works of Madhavacharya, sine and cosine series, or a lot of other great mathematicians are not even taught to postgraduate students. Now you may
Even
say, how does it matter?
even
Sorry,
calculus.
Bhaskaracharya.
Yeah, even
Bhaskaracharya.
calculus, Fourier, Bhaskaracharya, Fourier series, even
Yes.
binomial theorem, all of that. Now, what happens is, if all of this has come from Leibniz or some Western mathematician, then that does not give you the confidence that you were good at all, ever. Whereas if you study Dharampalji, and he has this beautiful 5 series compendium, it was even the muslin of India and the shipbuilding, in the 13th century was way ahead of its European counterparts. The ships that were being made here, were even superior to when even Britain was ruling the world as an imperial master. So we have to bring it into education, the greatness that it's not to just stay in the past, because we have to make new forms and frameworks, but we have to at some point tell the kids that these are the things that India did, and which is missing in our curriculum even today. So, and the second thing, sir, which is missing is something which we'll have to really work, is to increase indigenous scholarship. We talk about the greatness of Ayurveda, but how many colleges are there which are doing actual research in Ayurveda, as is the pharma industry or the modern medicine spending, trillions of dollars in modern medicine. So whatever we call great about India, that scholarship, that indigenous scholarship, there has to be increased. We have to have funding for it. We have to have people for it. So it has to start with a small nucleus, like the organization that you all represent, and it has to we have to make this fundamental shift in our education.
I have to add one thing to what you just said. About 5-6 years ago, somebody told me this Ramayana is all conceptual imagination. Where is the question of flying by a plane? The Pushpak Viman back to Ayodhya. So I did some research on it, and I came across a very ancient document somebody had seen, and then he guided me, and I found it. It's called Vimana Shastra. Now it's in pure Sanskrit, and it's a very ancient Sanskrit, and I was not able to read it myself. I got it read, and I only asked one question. I'm not interested in anything else except what was the fuel used in Rama's aeroplane to India. So he, after reading about this Vimana Shastra, he said instead of petrol, what they were using is mercury. So I was surprised, how can mercury be a fuel? So I raised it with a scientist in the United States, whom I knew. And he said something extraordinary. He said, "How did you know about this?" So I said, "I have, I mentioned to him about Ramayana." He says, "Well, otherwise I would have thought you have spied on us, because we are working on a research to replace petrol and air fuels and so on by mercury, and because you know that if you take a drop of mercury and put it on a pot of water, it'll go zip, 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 you see. So we are trying to see how we can manage the energy of this to be able to become a fuel for aeroplanes and so on. That means we'll fly much faster across the world if they manage to do it. So here is a document which is very ancient called Vimana Shastra. And I've tried very hard to persuade our this so-called department in education, which is supposed to do these things, said get this translated and make it as a compulsory reading in IITs.
Yes.
But so far been able to do it. But what you said struck me that I myself am in a different position. I've come across this thing that you said about calculus and so many other things. You see, we need to educate our people on what we had already done.
Yes.
Anyway,
and so it is great that we had the slogan "Make in India," but I think we have to evolve to now design and make in India, because we can't be just the factories and sweatshops and backyards of the factories abroad. So it's very sad that with the population of 50% of our youth are between 0 and 25 years, and that is where, when we make a change in education, it will be. It's surprising to see that in India we don't have our own brand of laptop or a mobile phone, or a EV. There is so we have to design and make in India, and that's where the problem is. This education system does not create innovators, thinkers, entrepreneurs, or leaders. It only creates job seekers. So with all due respect to Sundar Pichai and others, or CEOs of Google, and I say that, what about coming and setting up a company in India? I have much more respect for the founder of Zoho than I would have for some CEO somewhere. And we should stop celebrating these CEOs in foreign lands, and also people, this NRI community, and start celebrating the grassroots workers in India and innovators who are actually, making a difference here. They should become the role models everywhere. That would bring a change.
Excellent. I would suggest you call a seminar, and we will be happy to help you organize it, where you call some people who are thinking in these terms, not many, 20, 25 people, and hold a conference which will have huge impact again. So anyway, that's for the future.
So 2 years ago, So 2 years ago, I founded this initiative called transformindia.com, and it is to bring changes in the frameworks and design them as per the Indian genius and as per the Indian ethos in 12 areas of our individual and collective life. And it says transforming India one village at a time. And we are implementing that in the village of Fyang, where we are setting up this university. And I think this idea of having a seminar where different experts on these 12 areas, right from governance to technology to humanities, pure sciences, education, healthcare, art and culture, we should have maybe 12 seminars which bring experts in this field and start. It has to have and I think youth are looking for it. Youth are looking for beginning to see this change, but they don't know who to turn to. They don't have a leader or a mentor or an ecosystem. And if we can create that, that would be a legacy that we would be happy to leave behind.
Okay, good.
Ramesh, you want to take a question, or should I go ahead with some questions our viewers have raised? You are on mute, Ramesh ji. Hello, you are on mute. Okay, I'll go ahead with my question. Ma'am, some of our viewers want to know this institute of yours, do you attract students only from Ladakh, or are other students from other parts of India showing interest to come to Ladakh to get educated or trained at your institute of Himalayan Institute of Alternative Learning Ladakh? I think it is known as HAIL. Could you just inform our viewers about that, because some of our viewers have asked this question?
Yes, sir. So it is Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh, and it is an international institute for the mountain region, because India is predominantly plains. So we wanted to have a university for the mountain context because the problems there are very different. So the mix of the students is about 40 to 50% are from Ladakh, but another 25% are from other mountain regions of India and the world, like Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, the Northeast, including we have Baltistan, etc. We do work with those regions, and the balanced 25% are from the rest of the world and who are mountain enthusiasts like me. So that is how we have a mix of students. And sir, I would be very happy to say that we are one of those very few universities that does reverse technology transfer. I just mentioned to you that the pedagogy of the future, the infographic that I have come up with, would be a display at Victoria and Albert Museum. Similarly, our artificial glaciers are being set up in 9 countries in the world, including Switzerland, Chile, Nepal, Gilgit, Baltistan, etc. Similarly, our passive solar heated buildings are being, through the UNDP, being taken to places like Afghanistan and other trans-Himalayan regions, which are cold desert areas. So we are not importers of research and technology, but exporters of that as an institute. And the 2 other things about an institute that I would like to mention here is, we do not believe a higher education should be a siloed, walled space. So we work with the communities to solve their problems. And once we have prototyped and successfully conducted a research, then we also come up with policy documents and share it with the government, because the government does not have the resources or the money for research. But once they have a successful prototype with them, it's easy for them to scale up. So we combine communities, government, corporates, because we work with them. They can, through CSR, give funds for these research prototypes, and the students. So it's an ecosystem that we work with. And the second thing is, we are, I think, the only university in the world which does not charge fees to the students. So like the Gurukul system of yore, we believe that students should not pay with money, but with their sweat and creativity. And that's how you make education inclusive for all, because not everybody can pay with money, but they can all pay with their hard work and with their creativity. So instead, we pay them internships, because we believe that students at postgraduate level are adults and who are impact creators and makers already. And if we give them an ecosystem that they can go out there and experiment and are allowed to fail and make mistakes, then they can actually come up with solutions which cannot be done by adults because of a fixed mindset. So these are the 2 other very unique features of our university in the making, our institute.
Thank you, madam, for this very informative information which you shared with our viewers. Before I finish my point, you mentioned about corporates and all that. Surprisingly, we have in recent years noticed some of our Indian corporates like the Tatas and the Mahindras are ready to fund foreign universities, including Harvard, but are not investing enough money in India to some institute like yours, or set up other universities in India, but they want to fund universities which are full of funds. That is very because you did say about some corporates. So in that context, you wanted to say something on this?
Yeah, again, it is a reflection of a colonized mind, because even when they fund chairs abroad, they don't do it in those chairs that matter. For instance, at Oxford, the Center of Islamic Studies and the Center of Chinese Studies is so well funded compared to the Center for Hindu Studies. So people shy away from funding Hindu studies. I don't know why. They may set up a chair in some AI or something, but they are shy of funding Hindu studies. And that's why I believe that India is the only country that is the custodian of this Sanatan Dharma. And decolonizing is to be able to make Indian religion or dharma and knowledge systems, youth to be proud of it. And these corporates, they do not fund such chairs abroad, even if they do. But as far as India is concerned, we tick 16 of the 17 SDGs. And that too, it was not by design. It was just common sense. We went ahead. But one day we were just mapping it and we seem to tick 16. And the only one we do not is life underwater. That's because Ladakh is a desert and it does not have water. So the corporates are looking for funding in sectors which are sustainability driven. And there are not many in the country. So that way we've been lucky to evince their interest. But not as much as can be done. I was talking about this indigenous scholarship that needs huge funds. And unfortunately, the Ambanis and Adanis of India are not educated and evolved to understand this need and to fund at the right places.
Madam, one last question from me before Ramesh takes over. One of our viewers wants to know what is this melting of glaciers you refer to, and in fact, even Mr. Sonam Angchok refers to. And you said because of the melting of glaciers, there is shortage of water or something like that, and you all have created artificial glacier ponds or something like that. Could you just tell our viewers what exactly is this melting of glaciers, shortage of water, and these artificial glaciers? They would very much like to know.
Sure, sir. So just as we have the North and South Pole, the Himalayan region is considered as the third pole. It is a reservoir of billions of liters of water, and that gives water to not only India on this side, but several countries around the Himalayas. And because of our lifestyle and the global heating, because of carbon emissions, there is a 1.5 to 2 degree increase of temperatures across the world, which is leading to the melting of these glaciers. And I was amazed and amused to know that China is contemplating, after the whole of North Pole melts, how will it have its shipping route so that it can trade better, and that's how people think, instead of being worried about that how to. So we have a program also and a project that is one of Sonam's pet projects. I don't know when it will happen. He wants to refreeze the North Pole through the use of heat pumps, etc. So this melting of glaciers is a reality, and we see that in Ladakh because we are at the frontier of that problem. There are villages, as I said, that are being replaced, that are being abandoned because the waters in the canals have just dried up because the glaciers have gone back kilometers. And it is not just in the Himalayas, but also in Switzerland. And Switzerland, being a very rich country, they have put blankets over these glaciers, which are very expensive. But what we have tried to do is to refreeze the waters that are melting before they reach the Indus, so that they are stopped halfway and they are refrozen into artificial glaciers. So the artificial glaciers that we started making in one village, is now gone to about 30 villages in Ladakh. and 9 countries in the world, and they have stored more than 100 million liters of water. And we are trying to see that before that glacier completely melts, the next season of glacier is built, so that there is a re-glaciarization of this melting water. And that is the innovation that Ice Stupa artificial glacier is about. But as we say, that this is just fixing the problem. The only way we can truly solve the problem is by adopting simpler lifestyles, by not having consumerism as the driving force, by not having GDP growth as the measure of our success. But as Bhagavad Gita would say, or the Buddha would say, India always said that it is wiser to give up a desire than to fulfill one. And that's the knowledge India could give to the world to solve climate change, not to spend trillions of dollars again for climate solutions.
Thank you, Madam. Ramesh, your question?
Yes, Jagdishji, thank you. I just want to make 2 observations. Arvindji, you talked about quality of education in India and why people are running away from India. I think Gitanjali ji kind of alluded to it, because if you're not offering a pragmatic education system, you're still sticking to the colonial mindset of rote and just some archaic books that have still not been updated from 1930s. You are never going to upgrade that situation, because even though I think I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, Dr. Swamy, but if India wants to be the Vishwaguru, our foundational education system has to be upgraded. So I'm beyond this. I don't want to say, because Dr. Swamy will end up suing me for his next book. But I think the idea behind this for the Vishwaguru concept, it's when you have to be a guru, the foundational knowledge is really rotten in India. As long as we don't change that, there is no other way out. And Jagdish ji, you said, I think Gitanjali ji, you also said corporates funding universities abroad. And Jagdish ji said the same thing. And if you give one example, Infosys, the co-founder, Narayan Murthy's son, he's funding Sheldon Pollock in a US university to translate Sanskrit literature work. It is ridiculous. It is just ridiculous as to he's spending millions of dollars. And imagine the same millions of dollars could fund 10 such universities like yours, Gitanjali ji, and do much more genuine work, because we understand the core is they don't understand the ethos, the culture, and what our mindset is. And you're asking a guy who's never resided or been to India the way we are, trying to translate the books. It is shame. And even today, we depend on Max Muller's work on Sanskrit translation than on own in India. That's just a sad state. It just goes to say how important Gitanjali's vision is to inculcate knowledge within our own country rather than trying to depend on somebody else's translation. We depend on, if I want to, like, for example, look at a translation of anything, Rig Veda, the first book that comes to, if you go to Google, that comes to me is some translation by some Max Muller or some like that, or Macaulay's translation. This is just ridiculous. So how do we get over this mindset, Gitanjali?
Yes, sir. So we have to, as I said, move away from sloganeering to doing actual work, Like, for instance, because you took this example, let's say we built this Ram Mandir, which was very much necessary for the collective consciousness of this country. But what were temples earlier? They were truly temples, not just of worship, but also of learning. But if you go to all the Jyotirlings, first of all, where is Swachh Bharat in those temples? Secondly, there is no heritage restoration there. And thirdly, again, people are just coming and doing Abhishekam and those rituals without understanding who is Shiva, what does he stand for. There is nobody there teaching them what was actually happening. So when we say Hindu Rashtra or Hindutva, we have to go a little more deeper than what we have been doing so far. It is not jingoism, or it is not, this kind of political sloganeering alone. We have to do genuine work. And you mentioned about education. So I give this example that what is an Indian approach to education? Let's say a simple question, but that's what our seers gave their entire lives for. Who am I? Let's say I have to answer this question, who am I? So the Western framework, it teaches you anatomy and physiology in medicine. It teaches you psychology of who am I in arts. It teaches you neurosciences in science. And it teaches you history in arts again, and philosophy of who am I, and spirituality does not even exist. So by the time I'm a 25-year-old adult, I genuinely do not know who am I, because it is all scattered everywhere. Whereas what is Indian knowledge system and how it should be built right into from kindergarten is the Panchakosha system, for instance. If I say I am the right from the pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, and anandamaya and annamaya, then we have the anatomy and physiology in the annamaya, we have the pranamaya, the psychology, we know each one affects the other. It is integrated in its very design, and that should then come into the way medicine is taught. That has to come in the way a child understands who am I, and so on. So I will share with Jagjit ji the model that how we have to it is not just tinkering of what today's education system we have. It is a complete redoing, creating, and thematically building these things. And the other thing you said is that like this mercury, used in Vimana Shastra, there are so many palm leaves that are rotting in so many villages of India. If we have to truly work on indigenous knowledge systems, as it is, we lost 9 million books, and this was 1500 years before the Oxford Library was set up in Nalanda, when Bhaktiyar
Yes.
Khilji burnt it,
Yeah.
and it took 3 months. It kept burning for 3 months. So we've lost a lot of our indigenous knowledge, and only that which went out of the country, like Buddhism and all, came back later, so which we could revive. But a plenty more is lying in so many villages, in temples, as palm leaves that are rotting. And that heritage restoration is true temple, restoration work that we have to do. And then, as I said, this indigenous scholarship to actually take up this Vastu Shastra, the Vimana Shastra, even, we have the 9 darshanas. The 9 darshanas, the way philosophy is taught in this country is quite bad. The 9 darshanas are not taught, in an applied way. So these have to be made living. These have to be reclaimed, and they have to become part of our frameworks. And that is what will revive this nation. And that's where the corporates have to come, and they have to first know what heritage we have and what we need to revive. And they have to know that it is more fashionable to revive our own, indigenous knowledge systems than funding chairs in foreign universities who are anyway flushed with a lot of funds. And once you do that, they will come here because they're looking at India for the future. They have exhausted their knowledge systems. They are struggling with 95% black hole problem. They are looking for other, and maybe in these palm leaves lying in some village is the next research that could save the world.
One thing that you mentioned, Gitanjali, I just want to say, 2 days ago, the Shankaracharya of Kanchi gave a lecture. I'll say this in Tamil because it suits there, and I'll translate it. He said, you know what an alai? Alai means is a factory. So, he said crude oil gets purified in a refinery. So in Tamil, he says alai வந்து எண்ணெயை சுத்தம் பண்றது, கோவில் எண்ணத்தை சுத்தம் பண்றது. எண்ணம் is thoughts. So the way he said this, I mean, I'm just correlating what you just said when you talked about temples. Temples purify our thoughts, and refineries purify crude oil. So the concept-wise, when you say it in Tamil, the words are the same. Absolutely right. We need to bring our own ethos, our own culture, our own swadharmas and the methods into our education system. And you alluded to Japan. Even China was very strong about inculcating their core culture and values. And they don't care about their kids learning English or not. They said, no, Chinese is important. Learn about what our culture, and whether it is dark, bleak, whatever, it doesn't matter. They core values are taught in China. I think India, as Gitanjali ji said, we have to make a start in some place or the other, and maybe your university is going to be the start of it. Hopefully it grows into much more bigger university and motivates the so-called corporates or CSRs to invest more in universities and campuses like this, so that they teach our own values. Because at the end of the day, the Western is slowly moving towards India's knowledge system, and moving towards more and more towards where we are. And Dr. Swamy alluded, Sanskrit, of course, Sanskrit is one of the primary modes for natural language processing. Some work is being done in IIT Kanpur also. Dr. Swamy, very similar to what after NASA's paper, there is a huge team working on even writing bots based on Sanskrit, because they were able to make it more efficient because the way the language was structured.
Yes.
And that's, I just
And our
wanted to-
youth, yes, sir, and our youth's minds have to be developed.
Yes.
The purpose of education has to be the development of the mind, which is not happening. So we are buying the narratives which are being dished out to us. For instance, this whole Aryan invasion theory. How many Indians have taken the trouble? How many Indians have taken the trouble to find out? Because that is the basis of who we are. And there are books like how many Indians have taken the trouble to find out the dating of Rig Veda. We will just parrot if some Western scholar says they were just 1,000 years old,
Yes.
But there are studies, carbon dating, and linguistic studies, the study of River Saraswati, which the scholarships exist in India, which date Rig Veda back to 8,000 years, and that shifts a lot of narratives. Because if we were that, civilized,
Yes, we were
8,000
saying
years ago,
we were saying mutiny for a long time. It is when
Yes,
I was
sir.
in school, we used to call it mutiny. Now it's
the Sepoy
for
mutiny.
And
the
then,
first independence war.
yes, sir.
And Ramayana and
And then
Mahabharata
all
is
these-
referred. Ramayana and Mahabharata is referred to as mythology.
Right.
Myth.
Yes. And not Arthur's sword and Achilles' heel, that is history. Arthur's sword.
And Gitanjali, I think we've lost. What I think is we've lost the Purva Paksha. The way we learn.
Exactly.
You put out
That
a
is
topic.
liberalized.
Yes, you
Yeah.
put it out, discuss it, so that everybody gains. Even in a disagreement, you learn something. That Purva Paksha and that whole concept is gone, because right now it's all rote. This is the subject. This is the syllabus. A to B. My questions will ask only between these 100 pages, because I don't know anything beyond the 100 pages. The professors don't know anything beyond those 100 pages.
And so you're right. The foundational book of humanities has to be Nyaya, the logic, the
Mhm.
9 darshanas. And the foundational book of science has to be Vaisheshika,
Right.
which talks of Padartha and of quantum physics even. And these have to be brought back into. So when I teach our students in architecture, I teach them Bhumi Sukta. I teach them Purusha Sukta. And I connect it with this passive solar heated buildings, So who talks about Bhumi Sukta? I on the Earth Day, I said this Earth Day was set up in 1970 by some Senator Nelson, because there was some oil spillage in California. Whereas in Atharva Veda, 2,000 years ago, we have the Bhumi Sukta, which beautifully demonstrates every aspect of the earth. And that is the Earth Day that we should celebrate, not some 1970 Earth Day. So these are the decolonization aspects that I am very passionate to work on. And I'm glad that I have found the platform in a place like Ladakh, which is naturally decolonized. Maybe because they were never colonized by the British. It was an independent kingdom. And there is a difference there, which I see even in Nepal or Bhutan. Nepal does not have a Sunday. They have a Saturday as the holiday. They do not use the Gregorian calendar. They use the Indian the calendar. So these are little things of decolonization. And if a small country like Nepal and Bhutan can do it, I think India can do. India does not even have software in all its native languages. Whereas a small country like Israel, they made, Google was forced to make all these softwares in Hebrew and even in small European languages, because that's what they would accept. So at some time we have to be unabashedly Indian. We have to be ourselves, and we should not. I jokingly tell when I go and give talks on sustainability in 5-star hotels that why are all of you sitting in 18-degree closed halls with 3-piece suits in a tropical country like India? You know, you will find it funny if a Britisher set up his room at 40 degrees and wore dhoti, right? But why don't we find it funny that we wear 3-piece suits and make our temperatures 18 degrees when we have a beautiful tropical country? And we had places like this Hawa Mahal and a lot of these architectural things which cool down things naturally.
Yes.
We chide our children when they can't pronounce English well, but we won't be we won't be we won't find it, we'll find it funny if a Britisher chided his child to pronounce Hindi or some Indian language, right? So these are the so much ingrained in us, this colonized mind, that it will take many years to work on it, because we didn't do it right when we got free. Unfortunately, we had a prime minister who had very good intentions but had a very westernized intellect. So if we had a different prime minister, then it would have been a different story.
Yes.
If Patel had become the prime minister, which 11 provinces voted for, nobody voted for our first prime minister.
Yeah. So Mahatma Gandhi who forced Patel to yield in this favor. Yeah, he had to yield because everybody wanted partition. It's another story.
Yeah. But Sri Aurobindo has said that partition will and must go.
It will go. There's no question. It's already happening. They are getting unraveled. They are already in 2 pieces. It will be soon in 4 pieces. You don't have to worry about that. But if we do what we have been discussing so far, then India will be a country which will, the whole of Southeast Asia. If you go there as a person, who wants to study, you'll find amazing. Even China, I've traveled to every part of China. I find Indian culture in so many places. There's an article, there's a speech which was given by the president of Beijing University at Harvard in 1936, and you can get a copy easily by going to Google. His name is Hush, Dr. Hush, Hushih, and he's written a book, The Indianization of India, a case of peaceful borrowing for 300 years, where he says that all our concepts are from India. And of course, today's communists won't accept it. But he gave the speech in an international conference. And it was given by Chinese, not by an Indian. So there is enough. They obviously, it's not all going to be wiped out. It's all going to come back. And maybe you will be an agent of that comeback.
With your support and blessings.
Yeah, you have our support. All 4 of us here, we are totally with you. And we'll stand by you for whatever you want done, which is within our capacity.
Gitanjali, wishing you the very best for your university. I think you should make it more popular, and a lot of people from India would definitely love to learn where you are at. I think as you said, it delinks them from the garbage that we learn in every other place.
First thing we should do is go and visit
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And,
before I ask Arvind to wind up the show, ma'am, there is one question which is more personal. What does this word ANGMO in your name signifies or stands for? Could you just tell us?
Yeah. The beautiful culture of Ladakh, which I spoke to you about, which lives the indigenous culture and which is by design decolonized, is something that I have accepted as my karma bhumi. And ANGMO means the Shakti. It is in Ladakh you do not have surnames. So Wangchuk in Sonam's name means Shiva, And ANGMO or Wangmo means the Shakti, the feminine counterpart of Shiva.
Oh, great.
Nice to know about it. Thank you.
Great.
Arvind?
We have already spent more than 90 minutes, and it is unusual for our program. Normally, even if we extend it, is about 60-65 minutes. But you have been so expressive and so articulate. And the subject was so interesting. But before I wind up, just one small question, or maybe your comment. मैं हिंदी में पूछूंगा कि शायद भारत एकमात्र ऐसा देश है जिसकी न्याय व्यवस्था में सारे प्रयोग हिंदी में नहीं होते, भारतीय भाषाओं में नहीं होते, अंग्रेजी में होते हैं. हाई कोर्ट और सुप्रीम कोर्ट भी रीजनल लैंग्वेज को यूज नहीं करते, अंग्रेजी यूज करते हैं. हमारे पास भारत शायद एक ही मात्र राष्ट्र होगा जिसकी कोई राष्ट्रभाषा नहीं है. भारत की राष्ट्रभाषा कोई नहीं है, राजभाषा है. और हर मंत्रालय की एक राजभाषा समिति होती है, उसमें एक हिंदी सलाहकार समिति भी होती है हर मंत्रालय की, और मीटिंगें होती हैं. सौभाग्य से मैं भी जब मनमोहन सिंह वित्त मंत्री थे तो मैं उनकी मंत्रालय में हिंदी सलाहकार समिति का सदस्य था. बट वो एक रस्म है जो अदा की जाती है. और हम ये कब इस चीजों से उभरेंगे, अंग्रेजी की गुलामी से, कि हम भारतीय भाषाओं पर अपना ध्यान दे पाए? संक्षिप्त में आप थोड़ा छोटे में भाषण दें.
मेरा ये ख्याल है जी.
Before you say, let me just
जैसे मैंने कहा.
Go ahead. I mean, I just have one nasty comment I want to make. Have you heard the speech of Mr. Narendra Modi? I have actually documented it. 40% of his, 30% of his words are English. Well, you will see that. So go and correct him first. Then everybody will follow. That's how India will change. When the top changes, the bottom will then automatically do it and make it a thing. Anyway, sorry, you just on a side.
अगली बारी अगर हम भविष्य में कभी भी ये प्रोग्राम करेंगे तो हिंदी में करेंगे.
बहुत अच्छा.
और मेरा ये मानना है कि प्रथम भाषा हर भारतीय की उसकी मातृभाषा होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि वो उसमें हाँ जी. और दूसरी भाषा, चाहे हमें अच्छा लगे या ना लगे, चाहे हम आर्यन द्रविडियन डिवाइड के शिकार हों या कुछ भी हो, लेकिन दूसरी जो भाषा है, वो जो राष्ट्रीय भाषा, वो संस्कृत ही होनी चाहिए. लेकिन जैसे अंग्रेजी आज विक्टोरियन अंग्रेजी नहीं है, लेकिन वो कंटेम्परराइज हुई है, वैसे ही संस्कृत को भी थोड़ा बहुत प्राकृतिक होना होगा. उसमें भी चेंजेस आएंगे. तो वो दूसरी जो है संस्कृत भारत की राष्ट्रभाषा इसलिए होनी चाहिए क्योंकि सारी राजभाषाएं 30%, 40%, 50% वो संस्कृत के शब्द उनमें हैं, और इंटुइटिवली सब एक दूसरे को समझेंगे अगर वो दूसरी भाषा सीखें. लेकिन हम अंग्रेजी के खिलाफ नहीं हैं, वो एक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय भाषा है, और अंग्रेजी, फ्रेंच ये हमारी तीसरी या चौथी भाषा हो सकती है. और हमें अंडर एस्टिमेट नहीं करना चाहिए हमारे बच्चों को. अगर मैंने अपने बेटे के साथ ये प्रयोग किया था कि उसको 5 भाषाएं शुरू से उसके साथ प्रयोग की गई, और उसने वो 5 भाषाएं सीखी हैं. तो हमें इसमें झगड़ने की जरूरत नहीं है कि मातृभाषा की अंग्रेजी की संस्कृत. हम अगर अपनी एजुकेशन पद्धति को ठीक करेंगे तो हम हर बच्चे को 3 तो भाषाएं सिखा ही सकते हैं.
बहुत अच्छा, बहुत अच्छा, बहुत अच्छा.
After you conclude, I'll say something more. After you conclude,
Dr. Swamy.
No, you complete.
You complete your Arvind.
Okay, thank you very much. ये प्रोग्राम जिस विषय को हमने लेके किया, ट्रांसफॉर्मिंग इंडिया इज नॉट एन इजी टास्क. ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन इंडिया इज a ड्रीम, एंड HIAL is doing it. जैसे यज्ञ में हम आहुति देते हैं, हर छोटा बड़ा एक आहुति जो होती है वो भी यज्ञ के संपूर्ण करने में काम आती है. उसी प्रकार आपका जो कार्य है और आप जैसे लोगों का जो कार्य है, मैं डॉक्टर स्वामी के साथ पिछले 40 सालों से हूँ। आपने संस्कृत की बात की, डॉक्टर स्वामी ये बात पिछले 45 साल से कहते आ रहे हैं कि यदि भारत में कोई संपर्क भाषा हो सकती है, यदि भारत में कोई एक भाषा जो पूरे देश को जोड़ सकती है, वो मात्र संस्कृत हो सकती है। कई लोग असहमत होंगे, लेकिन जो आपने बात कही कि हर भाषा में, हर क्षेत्रीय भाषा में 30 से 40% शब्द संस्कृत भाषा से हैं, इसलिए संपर्क शुद्ध भाषा हो सकती है। और जो अन्य विषय आपने लिए, जरूर आप जैसे लोगों के काम से भारत बदल रहा है। आपने कहा कि आईएएस ऑफिसर का सिस्टम बदलना चाहिए। हाँ, कुछ लोगों ने प्रयास किया है और हो भी रहा है। जॉइंट डायरेक्टर या जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी लेवल पे कुछ एंट्रीज, लेटरल एंट्री शुरू हुई हैं। आपने जो गाउन की बात की, कई आईआईटीज ने और कई आईआईएम्स ने, बीएचयू ने और कई अलग विश्वविद्यालयों ने जो गाउन और कुर्ता और धोती और इस तरह की पोशाक में डिग्री देना शुरू किया है, एक अच्छा एक संकेत है और भारत बदल रहा है। निश्चित ही आप जैसे लोगों के प्रयासों से भारत और बदलेगा। हम चाहते हैं कि और शीघ्र भारत बदले और हम विश्व गुरु सही अर्थों में बन सकें और भारत सही अर्थों में विश्व गुरु बन सके। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। आपने you came to our program and spent about more than 90 minutes today. Thank you, Dr. Swamy, for initiating the topic, and you have been advocating all these issues which she has talked about today. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ramesh Swamy and Jagdish Shetty, for initiating this program, anchoring this program, and our background team led by Ashish Shetty, Swaminathan, Tejas Navalgul, Gadgi Rakesh, Ishwar Iyer, Vishal Mehta, Ajesh Nair, and Gurdat Shetty. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Like this, we'll be meeting next Sunday again with a new topic with Dr. Subramanian Swamy and perhaps a new guest. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind.